This question just fits in with our work today. Is this consciousness, which the human mind builds up through environment, heredity, and so forth, the consciousness by which we become aware of our spiritual consciousness? Oh, I'm sorry. Is this consciousness, which the human mind builds up through environment or heredity, the consciousness by which we become aware of our spiritual consciousness? In other words, is this human mind the means through which we become aware of our spiritual identity? No, it isn't, and it can't ever be. The things of God are foolishness with man, and the natural man receiveth not the things of God. This human consciousness which we have built up is that which has prevented us, and is still preventing us, from becoming aware of our true identity. If it weren't for this built-up human consciousness, we would all be living in the full awareness of true being. And when Paul says that we must die daily and be reborn of the Spirit, he means just that, that human mind must die in order for us to be reborn. It can't be the agency for good if it has to die. We would then want to preserve it. Now, it is for this reason that I repeat over and over again in the writings of the Infinite Way, and it is the reason that in all our classwork we have periods like last night to exemplify the activity of treatment or prayer, to show you that what the human mind goes through in that first stage really has nothing to do with the healing work or treatment or regeneration process. It is merely something that we use to try to lift ourselves out of it. Actually, the time comes when we don't even use mental argument, when we don't even declare truths or deny errors, because after one period of our spiritual development, we are enabled to get into a meditation and immediately contact our inner selfhood and receive the impartations of spirit. Now, in the degree that we are able to receive these impartations of spirit, this human mind doesn't function at all, except on the human level of memory or reasoning ability and those things that still require them. But you find that you require less and less reasoning ability because you have more and more of intuitive ability. You automatically know things that in previous experience you would have to think through or reason out. Now automatically you become aware of them with no thinking or reasoning process. It is very much like our use of the multiplication table. There is a period in our experience when if we multiply 12 times 12, we say 2 times 2 are 4, 2 times 1 are 2, and then 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1, and then we add them together and we find they're 144. Now all of a sudden we are grown up and we are asked what is 12 times 12, and we automatically answer 144. Why is that? Because we no longer need the reasoning or thinking process. Now we automatically know. Well, this goes a step further, because we may say that in knowing that 12 times 12, it's really a process of memory, having memorized it. But at least it shows you what I mean by the fact that a time does come when you do not use the reasoning or thinking process, but automatically know. There is an intuitive sense, and there is also a higher spiritual sense that reveals that which we must know without thinking or reasoning. It is through this knowing the truth about God and then developing the listening ear, that period of waiting, that this intuitive sense is developed, this higher consciousness is developed. And then you will find that you haven't used the human mind to learn about the spiritual, but that the spiritual has overcome or removed the human. You will find that particularly true when you come to treatment or prayer and find that you have reached a stage in which someone has asked for help and you do not have a single human thought enter your mind. You merely sit down. You haven't affirmed the truth. You haven't denied an error. And you wait. And then all of a sudden this light comes from within, this illumination or click or release, and you still do not know anything with your human mind. You still don't know anything that's happened. Yet in the course of time you receive word that the healing has taken place. There was a Christian Science lecturer who was away on a lecture trip for a while, and when he got back to his office, incidentally, he had met one of his students at his hotel, and they walked to his office together. And he went through the bundle of mail that was waiting there, but right near the top was a cablegram. And this cablegram said, "Thank you for a miraculous and instantaneous healing." So he turned to the student and he said, "Now let's find the cable so that we can find out what we miraculously and instantly healed." And they found the cable asking for help. Now, you see, there had been no conscious process involved in that healing. This lecturer had learned enough to know that if you live in spiritual consciousness, anyone who reaches out to you will touch that consciousness, no matter where you are, because it will never be further from your student than where they are. It being omnipresent, it being God consciousness, it is omnipresent where they are. And so they learn to reach out, but the practitioner, the teacher, learns that no one is reaching out to his human mentality, that no one is one bit interested in what truth he knows or doesn't know. They are reaching out to the developed or natural spiritual consciousness of that individual, and that does the healing work without conscious thought. Now, I believe that it is possible, if we ever have a student with no metaphysical background, I'm sure it will be possible to teach them healing without ever teaching them anything about treatment, because treatment is not necessary in healing. It is only a process that we use while we are still in the metaphysical or mental process of healing. In the first 2 years of my healing work, I not only used no mental argument, but didn't know there was any to use. Never knew how to give a treatment, hadn't been taught anything about treatment, and I had a very fortunate experience that even when I went through Christian Science class, my teacher knew of my healing work, and he did not give us any treatments in our class work, and for that particular purpose. Now then, treatment is only necessary as a stepping stone, just like knowing the truth is only necessary in order to have some assurance, something to cling to within us that gives us a human assurance of a superhuman presence and power. Now actually watch this and see if this doesn't bring out the fact that the human mind is not necessary in spiritual healing work, in spiritual living, that there is a divine truth which comes through to do our work. If we have, for instance, we'll just take this little one right here, this little bud, and we will say that I do not know what this is. I've never seen one before, and I don't know what it is. There's only one thing that I know about it, and that is, I know that it is. I don't even know it's a flower, remember. I don't know that it's a bud. I don't know anything about it. I've never seen anything like it before, and so I know nothing about it except one thing. I know that something is. That's all. The only thing of which I'm certain, something is here. What it is, I don't know. Why it is, I don't know. Now then, I can take the word is. Of that I'm certain. Is. Then I can close my eyes and get very still, and I can assure you that it would not be long before an impartation would come to me from within that this is a flower, or this is a bud, or this is a rose, or this is something in the kingdom of God. What it is would be revealed to me. And it would be revealed not by any human knowing, since I would have no human knowing. It would be revealed by a higher consciousness, that which we call the Spirit itself. Now watch this. There isn't anyone in this room who knows what God is. I don't care how many years you have studied. I don't care how many years you've pondered or thought. You do not yet know what God is. The only exception to that is if there is someone in this room who has had the spiritual or mystical illumination of conscious realization of God. In that case, of course, then there is someone who knows what God is. But otherwise, you do not yet know what God is. You may have read that God is mind. You may have read in the book of John that God is love. You may have read in metaphysics that God is principle. But you don't know that. You have merely read that or heard that or been told that, but you of your own self don't know it. You have no proof of it. You have no knowledge of it. You have only someone else's word. When Jesus says that the Father within me doeth the works, meaning God, you certainly don't know what he means by Father within you, because the human concept of a father is an adult male. You haven't any adult male within you. And so you know right well that if you are thinking along reasoning lines, that statement is all true, is all untrue, that you have a male, an adult male within you. You haven't. Now you would have to say, I haven't a father within me. That is, in any sense of any father that I ever heard about. Now what does the statement mean, the Father within me? Now you really are up against it, because you don't know what a father is according to Jesus' concept of father. You only know what a father is according to our limited human finite sense of father, and that's usually an adult male. Now then, what is father? What does Jesus mean by the Father within me? And how are you ever going to find out, since there isn't a piece of literature anywhere on the face of the earth in any language that will tell you what the Father within is? Now then, there is a way to find out. And that way is to go within and ask yourself the question, what did Jesus mean by the Father within? I do not know what the Father is. I do not know what he meant by Father. What is Father from his spiritual standpoint? Then you can't use your reasoning mind anymore, because you have no reasoning process that will go beyond the point of an adult male. And so you've got to stop using it, and you've got to listen. And in the course of time, and it might take 1 minute, it might take a year, it might take 10 years. It all depends on many, many things within yourself. But ultimately, you can be assured of this. You would come to a place where it would be revealed to you within what Jesus had in mind when he said, the Father within me. Now, let's go a step further. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ. And he also says, I live, yet not I, Christ liveth in me. Do you know what Christ is? No, at most right now, you have definitions of the word Christ, or you have concepts of the word Christ as it has been explained to you by somebody who experienced the Christ. Probably in her day, Mrs. Eddy had the experience itself of the Christ, and so she was able to say in her definition that Christ was the divine manifestation of God. Now then, that doesn't mean a thing to you, because divine manifestation of God means nothing any more to you than the term the Christ. It did to her, undoubtedly. It did to Paul, because they received their illumination on the subject of the Christ not from books or teachers, but from an experience. Now then, you can do the same thing. You can say, this term, the Christ, is a wonderful thing. As a matter of fact, I know of miracles that it has performed, but really and truly, what is the Christ through which I can perform these things? What is the Christ that liveth in me, or that can live my life for me? Now, as you go within and absolutely separate yourself from a reasoning, thinking process, and say, utterly, I do not know what this is. I do not know what the Father within is. I do not know what the Christ is. And if I accept anyone's word, I'm merely accepting a concept. Now, I must have the experience. And you may be assured of this, that in its time, the Christ would so reveal itself to you that you would know actually that there is a Christ, you would know what the Christ is, and you would know how to let it perform that which was given you to do. You would know how to let it perfect that which concerneth you. You would know how to cease from man whose breath is in his nostril and let this Christ perform all of the intelligent activities of your experience. Now, there is nothing in the world that there is no information, no knowledge, no truth that is not available to anyone in this room, and if they will learn it, to anyone in the entire world. And the reason is this: God is individual consciousness. God is your own consciousness. Therefore, once you penetrate beyond the realm of that which you have learned either through education or personal experience, and have penetrated that realm of your consciousness, you tap the infinite invisible, very much as Thomas Edison used to do when his workers would bring their experiments to him and say they had gone as far as they could. Now what is the next step? And then Mr. Edison would take this attitude of holding his hand behind his ear, listening, and then he would come out and tell them what the next step was. He didn't reason it out or think it out. He just stood there and waited, and the next thing came to him. That is exactly the same as any person engaged in inspirational work would have to do. If they are a writer, if they are a composer, if they are a painter or sculptor, they would have to receive their illumination or inspiration from a depth greater than their human capacity, or else they would merely be copiers of somebody else's work. There would be no such thing as original work in the world unless a person could penetrate beyond that which is already known. Yes, if one is an attorney and wants to go to court, they probably will look up all of the previous cases and decisions on such matters, and they might be limited to that, since they have to be guided by laws already in existence. But if you wanted to invent color television, you haven't got laws already known in existence, and you would have to go within to the unknown and bring through that which is not yet in textbooks. Or if you wanted to write an original story or original scripture, if you wished to do a painting of an original nature, there's no use looking what other people have done before and copying it or doing something similar. You have to penetrate beyond the realm of the known and get into the realm of the unknown. Now that is healing work as it is taught in our work. For instance, if I were to judge by appearances when called on for help, I would be continuously faced with male disorders and female disorders and universal medical theories and symptoms and diagnoses and beliefs, and I would find myself in a world of chaos, just where the entire medical world is. Now then, if I stop that and I turn to metaphysical books, what will I find? Statements that you are spiritual and that you are perfect and that you are harmonious, and then what good does that do? You're still complaining about these aches and pains, even after I've read in a book how spiritual you are. I might even point out the pages for you to read, so that you can read how spiritual you are. But I guess you've all had experience with that before, and I don't have to tell you the result of it. Now then, instead of delving around then in what is known humanly about you, and instead of delving around in books to find out what is spiritually known about you, I go into the silence. I retreat inside my own being and frankly say, Father, I know nothing. If anything, I'm a little more stupid than Jesus, and he was very stupid. He said, not only I can of my own self do nothing, but even if I talk of myself, I bear witness to a lie. My doctrine, my words are not mine. And I'm just a little bit less than Jesus, maybe a whole lot less. So I know far less than he, and he knew nothing. Now then, admitted, I know nothing about this situation, I know nothing about this person, I know nothing about this claim, and I certainly know nothing about God's kingdom. Therefore, Father, I turn to you for light, for wisdom, for enlightenment, for peace, for truth. And I learn to sit in this receptive attitude, and the first thing you know, into my awaiting consciousness comes some assurance. And I have had it say, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Well, that's all I cared about. If I can have that assurance from God that you are his beloved, I'm sure everything's all right and you're in God's care. I cannot do much demonstrating through reading that statement in a book. But when the Father itself says it, then you may be assured that all is well. Now, so it is with anything else. When I receive within that click or deep breath or sense of release or a sense of peace or freedom, I know that all is well. I know that God's on the field, and that's all that's to it. Now then, after you have said, I am well or I'm better, I still don't know what happened. I haven't the faintest idea of that. I know nothing about the operation of the Spirit in your experience. I only know that with its assurance to me comes a measure of release or freedom to you. Now, I also know this. There are certain principles that we are teaching in the message of the infinite way, principles that have not been put together in any teaching, any known teaching, and our work is based on those principles. And I know that I didn't read those principles in books. They came in this experience of meditation. I'll tell you this experience. I was in New York City working with an author on certain things in which he was interested, and it was necessary that our conversation be on these spiritual and metaphysical lines. And we spent the day together from 12 o'clock noon until midnight. And during that entire time, there was no conversation about him or me. The whole conversation was about this spiritual and metaphysical work that was at hand. And when I returned to my hotel that night, somewhat after midnight, I retired, and within an hour was awakened, jumped out of bed, and began to write. A little while I was back in bed, and within another hour I was up writing again. And this happened 5 times during the night, between something after midnight and 5:30 in the morning. And what I wrote during that night comprises 1/3 of the infinite way. That's how that happened. Now that was all a flowing and inner flowing from within, once I had spent 12 hours so high in consciousness. Now another experience happened. The night before my marriage, a friend presented me with one of these chain reference Bibles, and before retiring I looked into it, and I saw some passages of Paul's on the subject of immortality. And I put this Bible into my bag, was married the next day, and went away on a honeymoon. The minute we got to the hotel, I said, let me get at this thing right away. And I want you to know that the first chapter of The Infinite Way was written that day and that night out of this unfoldment that came through this book. There again, it wasn't something read in a book. It was a passage in a book that led to an unfoldment that came pouring through and gave us the chapter Immortality. Then there was another night soon after that when I dreamed. I was asleep, and I dreamed, and there was a red silk banner lowered from the ceiling. On that banner was a gold Old English script, and I knew that I must get that message there, and I knew that I was dreaming. And I forced myself awake, and fortunately when I did, the banner was still there with its message, and my wife saw me write down that message from that banner. And that message is the chapter New Horizon in The Infinite Way, and it's undoubtedly the most important chapter in the entire book, because that is the chapter that reveals to us that our work is not the demonstration of better humanhood, but the revelation of our true Christhood, our immortal and spiritual being. In the same way, it was back in 1937 in Boston that I was in meditation one night, and all of a sudden had to pick up pencil and paper and write. And when I was through, that which was written is the chapter New Jerusalem. Now, you'd only have to read that chapter to know that I didn't write it. You only have to read that to know that no human ever saw that in a book anywhere or heard it from man or woman, but that it was a pure inspiration that came through from something far higher than anything that could be thought out or reasoned. Those who have been through many classes with me have seen some of those miracles take place right on the platform or right at the desk when this work was happening. Some that are in this room sat and watched as the deep silence of my peace came through right while I was talking on a platform. And others are in this room who were there when the secret of the 23rd Psalm came through. And love and gratitude. And incidentally, love and gratitude is the deepest principle that I have ever found in religious literature anywhere or in any language. And that came through as a pure inspiration while standing on a platform in Seattle, Washington, with no more thought of such a subject than the man in the moon. It just came through, it poured through from a far deeper realm than thinking could be. And so it has been with every one of our major principles. You take these metaphysical notes, the principle of that is, my conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Now, you haven't heard that in literature, nor have I. And yet, in the midst of that class, the very first night of the class, that statement unfolded. And what does it mean? Think of it now. Just take this into your thought now. My conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. Isn't it true that if you're consciously at one with God, that you're consciously at one with the whole spiritual universe? If you're in God consciousness, you are in the consciousness of oneness with all that spiritually is. Now again, you can't learn that through your education. You can't learn that through your environment. That has to come through from this deeper spiritual realm. It's been that way with every one of the writings. That's why you're reading them. That's why you're here. That's why many have come from thousands of miles and spend thousands of dollars for these classes. Only one reason. There is an outpouring from the Spirit which you know, you feel it when you hear it, you feel it when you read it. And it is that which is the divine consciousness. Now then, that is not attained through the human consciousness, but in spite of it. You have to break through the human consciousness, and we do that through meditation. Where in religious teachings have you ever found the teaching of meditation as it is in the infinite way? Nowhere. And so you know that no man ever thought it up. No man ever dreamed it up. No man ever invented it. It came as a pure revelation from within that if we find some method of meditation, some method of going within to where we no longer think or reason, that we will there be in touch with the infinite, that we will there find the source of our spiritual wisdom, our spiritual life, our spiritual love. You must remember this. Human love, no matter on how high a plane it is a very limited and a very changing thing. And most people have found great disappointment in life merely because of the disappointments that are to be met with in human love. And I don't only mean marital love, but I mean parental love and filial love and brotherly love and sisterly love and neighborly love and national love. We've all suffered disappointment in every form of human love. And therefore, there isn't much use of just going on trying to be more loving. There's no use going on trying to find somebody who will be more loving than the last one. It won't do. It won't work. Now then, does that mean that life is hopeless for us? That there's to be no love, no contentment, no peace? Not at all. It means go deeper. Go deeper down into consciousness until you tap the divine love, until you tap the source of love. Then you will find that coming out through those humans that you meet. And then you will find that right here on this human level, you will find lasting friendships, lasting loves, lasting marriages, lasting business associations, and so forth and so on, but only insofar as they are demonstrated through having made contact with the spiritual source of love. Now it is in the same way that you can, in a measure, improve your lives through physical means. There's no question in my mind that if everybody gave up the use of all flour products, all wheat products, that they automatically would increase their health by 50% and their longevity by 10 years. I mean that seriously. Anyone can do that. Just give up wheat products, because that's what's destroying the health and life of people. And there are other changes that could be made in the diet that would add still more health and still more longevity to one's experience. There's no question about that. But the point is that having done that, you have attained just a little more bodily comfort and a few more years of this human span. But watch the miracle that happens as you go deeper than any physical sense of change and touch that source of life eternal which is within you, that which the Master referred to as the waters of life that spring up into life eternal. Again, he said, we do not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. And if you notice, he did not say out of every word that comes from a Bible or a metaphysical textbook. He says every word that comes from the mouth of God. You have got to hear that word right out of the mouth of God, that is within yourself, in order for it to be the word of truth that is the bread of life and the eternal waters of life. We do not live by bread alone. I have a meat the world knows not of. Certainly, if I can tap the inner source of life, divine consciousness, if I can tap the inner source of love, then I will have found life eternal and lots of beautiful love. But I must first tap it within me in order to experience it in the without. I must first learn to hear the still small voice from within me uttering the Word of God, imparting the spiritual message. Now, you may use the human mind as a stepping stone. And you do that in the way that I illustrated last night, by keeping thought stayed on God and by acknowledging God in all our ways. Keep your conversation, even your inner conversation, your thought conversation, keep that in heaven. Keep your mind focused on God the Spirit, the invisible, and then take some phase of God, whether it's life or love or substance or law, and keep pondering God as the only law of the universe, thereby annihilating all sense of human law, legal law, material law, medical law, atomic law. Think of God as the source of all life, and that every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God becomes more and more of this life eternal in our experience. And as you keep pondering these things, finally you come to a place where thought automatically stops. There's just nothing left to think about, and peace descends. Then it is in that peace that you wait for the voice to speak to you, or the assurance to come, or an inspiration of one sort or another, and in that way you develop the ability to be receptive to the withinness, to the depth of the divine consciousness. Then you tap the source of divine love, or divine life, or divine truth. You tap the source of all inspiration, whether it's in literature, art, science, truth, whatever it may be. You tap the source, but you only tap it when you go beyond the realm of thinking. Who, by taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? And if you cannot do the least of these things by taking thought, why try to do the greater things? And so it is. God says, your thoughts are not my thoughts, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. God's thoughts are the real powers of the world. Now then, through metaphysics, most students have developed a fear of human thought as if it was some kind of an evil power. But it isn't. It isn't any more an evil power than it is a good power. It is just a non-power. For instance, when we use human thought to declare that 12 times 12 is 144, we haven't made it so. That isn't a power. That is an avenue of awareness. If you use your thought to look up this address or this telephone number, you haven't made anything so. You haven't made your thought a power. Your thought has merely become an avenue of awareness. If you look up something in a textbook, whether it's metaphysics or mechanics, if you study art, literature, music, with your mind, you're not using that as a power. You're using that as an avenue of awareness leading back to the source of power that is within. Now, when we understand the human mind as an avenue of awareness, we neither credit it with being a good power, nor do we fear it as an evil power. We don't say that good thoughts are power, and we don't say that evil thoughts are power. It is very much like a man I met one time who was on this metaphysical path, but he was indulging alcohol. And I commented on it one day, since I was a close enough friend to do it, and he said, "Oh, I understand, you being a Christian Scientist, of course, you think that alcohol was evil." And I said, "No, I'm sorry to tell you, I don't think that alcohol is evil. And that's why I'm asking you why you use it. I don't think it's good either. But you must think it's good if you're using it. Now, if alcohol has the power of being good, you may be assured that in one way or another it will have the power of being evil. There are medicines that 1 grain of will be good and 3 grains of will be evil. And so it is, the moment you impart a power of good to something, be assured of this: you must be prepared to impart a power of evil to it. Now, we do not say for a moment that alcohol is evil, because that would be giving some power to it, and in our work, God is the only power. So there's no evil power in alcohol. But tell me, if God is the only power, what good power is there in alcohol? And if there's no good power in it, why use it? Nobody would use it unless they found in it some measure of good. And it is in the finding of good in it that ultimately they find the evil in it. And you watch this. As you look upon this world and find something good, you will also find that in some way it can be evil. Just like money. If people find money good, they will find that either the lack of it or overabundance of it will be evil. Always everything that is in the outer world, if it is given the power of evil, it will also be found to have a measure of power of good. If it has the power of good, it will be found to have a measure of the power of evil. Whereas, once you go right down through the center and realize that only spirit is power, you will then be able to use anything in the outer realm that has a normal, natural purpose, and you will find in it neither good nor evil. Just as we are finding neither good nor evil in these flowers. We're just finding the joy of their aroma or beauty or form or color, but we're finding nothing in and of themselves to be good nor necessary, but we find them to be of beauty. Now then, we're not giving power to them to do anything for us, to us, or against us. We're recognizing that any power, even of beauty that's in them, is an emanation of God. So we're giving all the power there is to God. Well, I have an idea that if you had a good big glass of whiskey and were to look at it and say, "Now look, I'm going to give you no power except the power you derive from God," I have an idea that you would find soon it would be tasteless and sensationless. Not good and not bad. And that's the way it should be. Now do you see why this entire work is not a doing away with the human mind, since the human mind is an avenue of awareness, but in the recognition of the fact that the human mind is not a power, and learning to go deeper within and demonstrate the great truth that the Master gave us. I have meat. I have water. I can give you water, living waters, even without a bucket. I am the bread of life. We do not live by bread alone, but by the bread of life, the spiritual word, every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. All of this teaching is a turning of ourselves within until we draw up from the depths of our being these things that the Master revealed to us. Divine inspiration, divine love, divine life, all of the good things flowing from within our own being to the without. Yes, here's what it says. That is the meaning of I will never leave you nor forsake you. That is the meaning of the statement, I will never leave you nor forsake you. This I, whatever it is that you call it, this depth of your inner being, this is the power, this is the presence, this is the divinity. And it says from within, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Well, then you can go on yourself and read Scripture and see how it reveals that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. As I was with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, so I will be with you. I was with you before Abraham was. I will be with you unto the end of the world. And then you begin to perceive that what was meant was not statements in a book, not anything you could think about, because you can't think about what that I is. You don't know what that I is. But as you go in intuitively to yourself, you will find that way deep down within you there is a presence. Now here you have what the Master called the Father within me, and what Paul called the Christ. Now, after a whole hour of pondering the within, we begin to arrive at the fact that what was meant by the Father within, or what was meant by the Christ, is really that I that will never leave you nor forsake you, that I that was with us before Abraham was, that I which is really our own divinity, our own divine being, the Christhood, the divine sonship of our being. And it says, I will go before you to make the crooked places straight. I will walk beside you. I will walk behind you. Son, thou art ever with me. All that I have is thine. Do you see now what the Father within is? Do you see what the Christ is? And do you see how you arrive at the awareness of it? As you get within and ponder these things, and then go beyond the depth of the reasoning mind until it springs up and commences to reveal itself. Now, you see the thing now that's coming up from the depth of me was something that I didn't think of or reason out or anything else. All of a sudden it began to say, I will never leave you. And now we know what the Father within is. It's that I. Well, why was it called the Father? I suppose that the Master knew that it was a creative principle. The Word was made flesh. He must have taught John that the Word became flesh. In other words, the Word, this I that I am, it says so. It says it was God. It says that it's I am. This I that I am was a creative principle that became flesh, became form, became tangible as experience, as identity. And so it is that this I that is within me is the creative principle of all the good in my experience. This I that is within me is the Father, or creative principle. It is the Christ, or divine Son, the divine sonship, the offspring of God, this I that is within me. And so we have God the Father, and so we have God the Son. God the Father, and then I, God the Son. This spiritual divinity within me, which is the creative principle of good in my experience, which is the source of strength. I can do all things through Christ, through this realization of why I am the very Christ at the center of my being. And you see how all of this has to come out, not because somebody said it, not because somebody wrote it in a book, but because it became a living experience in our soul. Now, all healing work is a living experience within our soul. Anyone who tries to do healing work just because they have read all the words in a book, or because they know the statements of truth to make or the denials to make, will really fail. Even though at the beginning they may have a little temporary measure of success, in the end they will fail, because healing work is not a product of the human mind. Healing work is not the product of your mind or mine. Healing work is not the product of thought. Healing work is the product of a divine inspiration or illumination that flows up from the center of our being. It far transcends anything that you or I may know. If this weren't true, the Master wouldn't have said, I can of my own self do nothing. He would have been able to do a lot of things because he knew so much. But even with all he knew, he couldn't do anything. It was only the Father within me that doeth the work. The revelation is that there is a spiritual presence at the center of your being and of mine. And this spiritual presence is empowered from on high with all the power of the Godhead. All the power. It gives us power to forgive sins, gives us the power to heal disease, but it is a power derived from God. And it is all the power of the Godhead. It's not a little bit of power. It's not a spark of power. When one is endued with power from on high, it is the power to say, rise, pick up your bed, and walk. Maiden, I say unto thee, arise. What did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. It's not a man talking. It's a spirit being voiced through the avenue of an individual consciousness. If it isn't the Father saying it, then you can say, rise all you like, and nothing's going to happen. I of my own self can do nothing is one of the most profound statements of wisdom ever uttered. And so as long as I of my own self can do nothing, there must be a period, if it's a split second, in which I know nothing, am nothing, desire nothing, but become a vacuum in order that it, this Word of God, this bread of life, shall spring forth through my lips. Moses was slow of speech, but the Lord promised he would put the words in his mouth, and he did. And if you're called before the magistrates, you don't have to take thought what you shall think. You don't need clever thoughts or wisecracks or profound knowledge. You need the humble faith that enables you to say, I can of my own self do nothing, but there is that within my being which can impart itself to me in all of its wisdom, in all of its glory, and all of its power. Now, let me give you a little help in your healing work. Do not hesitate when you are called upon for help to sit down and hold up the word is in front of you, mentally I mean, is, I-S, is. As much as to say, there is something here, but I don't know what it is or who it is. It claims to be a person and it claims to be a condition, but I know nothing about those things. I know not how to go out or how to come in. I do not know how to pray. Remember that. I do not know how to pray. I do not know how to treat. I must let the Spirit bear witness with my spirit. I must let the Spirit make intercession for me. So I do not know who this is or what this is or why this is. I only know that before me there is an is. There is something. There is somebody. And now, Father, take over and enlighten me. And then from the depths of your withinness will come some kind of a peace be still to the situation, some kind of an assurance, and you will begin to see harmony come. You see, this is also following out a teaching of the Master. Judge not after appearances, judge righteous judgment. Out here, somebody says they're a human being, and they say they're a sick human being or a poor human being or an unemployed human being, and you have been told by the divine comfort of Spirit of truth in you to judge not after appearances, and so you cannot judge what or who is before you, and so you use the word is. Is. I do know, Father, there is an is here. Something is here. Someone is here. What is it? Who is it? What is the truth about it? And then you turn within and you let this divine impartation unfold. You let this wisdom come, and just watch what happens even before this week is over. Thank you.